Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. Special good morning to those of you showing up early and on time. Let me get these captions turned off so we'll have to keep them running. We're going to get started in just a second with the live training, but I wanted to introduce you to something I do that I really like doing. And there's many different ways I've heard of this through Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. Through a book called Traction, through another book called One Thing. I really like the idea of this one thing. And so whenever I'm planning my day, I'm always trying to think my day, my week, my month. I try to think to myself, what's one thing I can do that if I do it, it will make everything else easier or unnecessary. And it's really applicable to today's training about which agencies love 8As the most, because one thing we can do that could make things easier, even a lot of things unnecessary, is to find out which agencies love 8A small businesses or HUBZone small businesses, et cetera, and then focus our energy towards them. And so that's an example of one thing that you could do to just pause from all these things and go, let me just really understand which agencies most likely want to work with me. And that's going to be the point of today's topic. That's just a quick tip for those of you showing up early and on time. I know it's a Friday. I did see something in the chat. By the way, if you're in the chat and you're not in LinkedIn already, connect with me on LinkedIn. Come on over into LinkedIn, because not only do we do most of our sharing of content over here and information, but in LinkedIn is where you can find other people to build relationships with. We have, I have 25,000 followers, right? And I often try to put people, connecting them together. I'll do a post and I'll say, hey, if anybody wants to connect, and I'll get hundreds of people in there. It's a great way to connect. You can't do it on any other social media platform like you can here. Sometimes you even meet buyers, federal buyers, who come into my training. So come on over here. If you haven't, open a LinkedIn account. You can open a free one, I think, and get in here if you're not already in LinkedIn. Okay, I'm just making sure my ducks. Oh, and somebody asked me in chat, do I plan on doing training on the HUBZone? Actually, the GovCon Chamber used to be called, when we first started, the HUBZone Chamber of Commerce, because that's where our focus was. So definitely go look at a lot of my old training related to the HUBZone program, because it is all evergreen, meaning lasting pretty much forever. It's all still relevant. But what I'm going to teach today, just replace 8A with HUBZone, and you're learning what I'm showing you. What I'm going to show today is going to come out of USA Spending primarily, right? And that data is pulled from FPDS. Those two tools, if you don't know how to use them, learn how to use them. Okay, let me get started with formal training today. In today's training, we're going to be talking about finding federal agencies that love 8A small businesses, right? I really believe that you should stop going to agencies that don't care about you. But how do you know which ones care about you? How do you know which ones don't? I can talk about that more today. As I was shaping this training, I was going back to an old TV show that I really liked when it was out. And in fact, even the replays or reruns are really good. It's Cheers. And in Cheers, they had an opening theme song that went something along the lines of this. Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. And I really like this because it aligns to what I'm trying to teach today. I want to find agencies that love me if I'm an 8A, or love you if you're an 8A small business. And that's what we're going to cover down in today's training, to make sure we're finding those people who are glad we came, right? The ones that are glad we showed up. In today's training, I'm going to cover the importance of going into those agencies. So before we dive into the meat of it, I want to make sure we just stop and go, well, why? Why not hit every agency, et cetera? Well, let's look at why it's important to go to agencies that love 8A small businesses. And then we're going to move on and talk about the meat of the numbers and what I'm sharing today. So I'm going to share set-aside numbers. This is different than sole source numbers. So sometimes set-asides are competition, right? So we're setting it aside for 8A competition. You still have competition, it's just down to a smaller pool. And then we're going to talk about direct award numbers. And this is where they're just doing sole source directly to one company, maybe your company. I have a customer who got a sole source last year of $4 million, and they just went in, worked with a contract officer, and they were able to get that. That's a huge deal when you think about how many competitors are in the government market, and 8As have, in particular, more than any other business, this advantage. And so understanding those numbers, and then from those numbers, I want you to understand the actual agencies. So I'm going to share which agencies are doing the most set-asides and which agencies are doing the most sole source. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for your 8A firm or your HUBZone firm, right? I want you to be able to have predictable results. And that comes from understanding, having the knowledge and the skills to pursue government contracts. If you haven't already subscribed to the Government Contracting Success newsletter that I have, definitely do that. That's where we put a ton of information. We keep you up to date on what's going on. And, training like this, if you missed the training, you're able to follow back up. I wanted to thank you if you already registered for today's training. If you didn't, please consider registering for future trainings. For example, tomorrow, maybe Sunday at the latest, I'll be dropping next week's trainings. And so when you see those, go in and click that you're going to attend. You can attend live or replay. Live is where you can interact with a bunch of people, right? But the idea is when you do that, you're letting others know about the training. And that goes to my last point. Make sure you invite others. Don't come on your own. Once you start coming back 2, 3, 4 times, you like and trust us. You like the information. So bring a friend. Make sure that they're benefiting from this as well. Okay. Hey, actually, before I go too much further on this slide, do me a favor. And in the chat, if you're an 8A, put your company name. Let us know who you are. Put your core competency. I get a lot of feedback when I do these trainings, whether people are doing live or they're watching the replay. I get a lot of feedback, and a lot of times that feedback is, hey, how can I reach out to 8A small businesses? So I'd love to have your information in the chat that they can just find on their own, or I can go back after the fact and learn about you. So just a couple of reasons on why knowing the agencies who love you, especially as an 8A, right? Why it's important. First thing is it just stops wasting time. When you think about trying to knock on many different doors and you're going into the wrong direction, it doesn't work. It's the same thing like when you're selling something. You really want to understand which agencies are buying what you sell. When you understand that, you start targeting them, the chances of you selling more is bigger than if you're selling to agencies who don't buy what you sell. It's the same thing related to using companies like yours. The second bullet I have here is I want you to stop going where you're unwanted. People try to say this too nicely, but the reality is if an agency is not using 8A set-asides or woman-owned set-asides, HUBZone set-asides, it's because they don't care. They don't want you. Like they clearly don't want you. If they wanted you, they would do set-asides. And a lot of times we think, maybe they want us. No, they don't. And you really need to understand which agencies do love you so that you start putting your energy there and you'll start feeling the love. You'll feel the ability to grow your company within that agency compared to banging your head. I always say, or I am saying certainly today, right? No set-asides in an agency, then there's no love for your type of business. If there's no women-owned set-asides or not many, then they don't love women-owned small businesses. No matter what the hype is, the proof is whether they do set-asides. The proof is not whether women-owned small businesses are working in an agency. That's different. That's you going in and taking it. The proof is not if 8A small businesses are in an agency winning business. That's you going in and winning it. The proof is whether they actually do set-asides. They say, I want to set aside huge portions of my spend for 8A small businesses. So no set-asides, there's no love there. It's a really easy calculation. And then the last reason I put here about why knowing who loves 8As is important is because when you know who loves businesses like yours and you start focusing your energy there, your ability to grow revenue is going to significantly increase. And the speed of seeing that revenue is going to increase. I put down 2 myths here at the bottom. The first myth is that agencies want to hit their small business goals. They do not. If you want to hit your goals, you're going to do it. I want to sit there and get in shape. And in fact, getting in shape means I need to exercise. Well, I'm just talking about wanting to get in shape. If I really wanted to get in shape, I would exercise 30 minutes every single day, right? I would at least put my tennis shoes on. And so agencies who just talk about the goals and set them, but aren't hitting them, they don't care about it, right? Agencies don't care about hitting their goals if they're not. And this goes to my second one and this is a big myth we tell ourselves is that, that agency is not hitting their goals. They're desperate for us. No, they're not. They don't care about us. Don't go to the ones who aren't hitting your goals. I don't know if I say it a little later, but go where you're not needed. This is a sales line I've learned long time ago about sales coaching with salespeople. You want to go where you're not needed. And what this means is Go to the agencies that are using 8As a lot and doing $1 billion in set aside to 8A small business or HUBZone or whatever, right? Go to those agencies and they're just going to need more. They're just going to be open to doing more. But if you look to an agency that's not hitting their goals and think, well, I can help you hit their goals, it's like they don't need your help. They've got billions of dollars in spend. If they wanted to hit the goals, they would. There's zero excuse for an agency not to hit its goals. I once helped a nuclear scientist, a company that had nuclear scientists in it, get a HUBZone set aside, right? Back in 2018. You can watch the video because it was just amazing. It never occurred to me that there would be, nuclear scientists who are HUBZone certified as well. But it was a really eye-opening thing for me that if the agencies wanted to hit their goals, they would hit their goals. So let's go to town talking about the numbers. I'm going to stagger back and forth between FY22 and 23. It looks like 23's dollars are being reported pretty significantly now. So, we're 4 months out of that year. The year ended September 30th. So we got a good amount of portion. It looks like the data's there. So this first slide, what I'm talking about is 8A set-asides and the dollars, how much went. The first number I have, and there's 3 bullets for each year. The first number is, what was the overall contract spend? And if you're curious on how I get this data right, it's coming out of USA Spending. So it's a good basic public database, but it's coming out of USA Spending. And one of the things I do is I go in and I say, show me FY 2022. And then the contract type, I say, show me contracts, because I don't want to see grants and all these other things, right? And so that's how I come up with these numbers. 680 million or billion basically was contracted out to industry. And of that, 3.6 in 2022 was set aside to 8A small businesses. And in 2023, you can see these numbers, right? $745 billion in contract dollars and $4 billion in set aside. So a little bit of increase. Here's the first place I want to stop you. Stop listening to the SBAs. They just try to give themselves credit for all sorts of stuff that you do, not that they do. So an example is right here. Let me just show you. There was 3.6 set aside to 8As in 2022, and there was $4 billion in 2023. The agencies and SBA will take credit for that. Yet the credit should go to Congress and the president, who's just spending American tax dollars, right? And they went from 680 billion to 745. You can't increase like that and avoid increasing the small business spend as well. So don't let these numbers and this hype people talk about really drive your decisions, et cetera. Look at the actual data. Make your decisions on data. And so the other thing that is really fascinating, and you've probably seen this already if you're looking at my slides, is that in 2022, there was about 2,295, so almost 2,300 contracts to get that 3.6 billion. In 2023, there was a bigger spend with 8A set-asides, but a lot fewer contracts, so 200 contracts less. And that's a big deal, and it's a kind of a scary trend because it means maybe they're going to less vendors, et cetera. And so we want to track on that. You'll see on this slide and the next slide, I think that this spend here is not nearly enough. Often the SBA, again, will give themselves credit for a lot of activity. But if you look in here and you see that there's 6,000 8A businesses roughly, and only 2,200 contracts are in there, some of these 8As are winning multiple contracts. That means they are not even doing enough set-aside contracts for every single 8A. And I'm not saying they have to, but if they're going to be doing these kind of numbers, then that's something I want to be watching out for. You want to know who is awarding these 8A set-aside contracts. So let's look at the next set of numbers. That was 8A set-aside. That means competitive set-aside for 8A businesses. This one is for 8A sole source and direct awards. And in here, same thing. I'm using 2022 and 23. The numbers on the top bullets are the same because this is the annual contract dollar spend. But look at the difference here. So 8A sole source, it was 8.5 billion went sole source. These are direct awards with 16,000, 17,000 contract actions, whatever they want to call it, right? And then you see in the next year, it went up to $10 billion. And again, the contracts dropped. Right. And so that's something to be tracking, but that's a big difference. You'll see in a second. But before I move on and compare these set-asides and sole source, look at this. Just again, that's not nearly enough. There's not enough activity or dollars going into the 8A program compared to the amount of money being spent. Right. If we're looking at 5% plus in what they're trying to do, this isn't 5% on the direct awards. but there are a lot of contract awards, and I like that, right? So here you can see that there's, 3 times basically the number of 8A firms we have. It doesn't mean every 8A got something, but it does mean there's a lot more activity with the sole source. And this also tells me there's set aside and sole source. And you'll see in a second, actually, let me change the slide. You'll see here that it's like 2 or 3 times the size, the contract awards. And when you look at the award numbers in 23, there's 2,000 set aside contracts and there's 15,000 sole sources. This tells me as an 8A, I've got to figure out how to be getting direct awards as sole source, right? This is what I work with my customers on, is saying, you need to double down on this. That's the whole point of the 8A small business program, is to have this massive business development up ramp or on ramp, if you will, in your 9 years. You want to be getting as many 8A awards as you can, and most of them tend to be direct awards, so that you can then begin to start competing competitive 8A, competitive small business, and even full and open on your way out of the 8A program. But these, so these numbers here reflect the last 2 slides I did, but I just want you to see the difference between the set asides and sole source 2022, right? 3.6 billion went up to 8.6 billion. So 5 billion more in 2022 was awarded through sole source directly to one company. Same thing with 2023, right? 4 billion went to 10 billion. So 6 billion more went to 8A small businesses as a direct award. The one caveat I want to put in here is, and I'll do this another time, but these numbers are false to a degree, right? If you look in the data, ANCs, these Alaska Native corporations, are picking up a huge portion, 60+%. And a lot of other business owners aren't. And so what I want to be doing in 2024 is teaching you how to go after not just 8A set aside, which should be fairly straightforward. It's like competing on anything, but how do you go after the direct awards, right? So you'll see me do a lot more training on that. Hence the reason I told you sign up for the newsletter, so you can see when I do free training on direct awards, etc. Okay, so let's talk about the agencies. So that was who did set asides and sole sources, or the dollars. Let's talk about who's doing those dollars. You can see I've got them in 2 different columns, trying to see which agencies are favoring 8As for set asides. In a minute, I'll do the same thing on sole source. But right off the bat, the first thing you can see from both sides is that the Army is out in front completely over any other agency, including its sister services, the Air Force and Navy, right? And so the Army is doing $705 million in set asides. In 2023, they did 800 million. Right? This is a huge deal. And so here you can start seeing it come down. Air Force, NASA, CMS is out of HHS. So this is Centers for Medicaid Services. I feel like I'm saying the name wrong. Navy, IRS, FAA is Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Energy. And then it really peters out, right? When you look at the top 10, look at where the Washington Headquarters Service, WHS, 68 million, 100 million for all these guys, like the bottom 7 or bottom 5, excuse me. The bottom 5 are just a fraction of what the Army does. This one piece of data here is what tells me that every 8A somehow should be aligning with the Army. In fact, if I was talking to anybody who was thinking about getting 8A, I would tell them, hold off for 2 or 3 years until not only you get revenue and you're really feeling good, but until you're in the Army. Go get in the Army, get some clearances, get some subcontracting past performance, and then make sure the Army's part of your target agency. Why wouldn't you? If they're the biggest spender, right, in there, and it was huge. I don't know if I'm going to show it. I might show it in the next slide, but they spend a massive amount. We're talking about billions. This number here that you're seeing is just set asides, right? So when you look in here and you see who's doing the set asides, like this, a couple of them are really interesting, because the next slide I'm going to go to sole sources. But NASA, for example, does set asides and they're in the lead. But I think they come off the list completely of the top 10 when you go to sole source. It's as if NASA doesn't do sole source. And so understanding which agencies are doing which. And this one here, FAS, that's GSA, various ways that they do it. So when you're trying to figure out which agencies should I be targeting, here's your top 10. There is a top 20, and you can look at the next 10. but it really isn't going to be that impressive because then it's just going to start dropping down. And what I always tell people is you want to find agencies that when you get in, there's room for you to get $50 million of contract revenue every single year from them. And it doesn't mean you're just going to go in and they're going to give it to you. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy to get. But what I'm saying is there needs to be enough room that if you got $50 million a year, it really wouldn't be a dent in the overall spend, right? And so this is just set asides for 8A. This does not count sole source or small business or full and open. So you got a lot of room, right? But this next slide here is about which agencies favor 8A small businesses for sole source awards, or what we call direct awards as well, right? Those are interchangeable, sole source or direct award. And if you come in here and look at this, the awards that are in here and who's getting this money is just staggering. I talked about this last year, towards the end of last year or last fiscal year. So in August and September, I was trying to let people know, it's like, look, the Army is spending $2.2 billion on direct awards, however they do it, with 8A small businesses. And so if you're an 8A small business and these numbers are showing you that the Army spends twice as much as the next closest spender, and really like 5 times as much as almost everybody else and beyond, then you want to be looking at DOD and the Army in particular. And so here you can start seeing that they've got a good amount of spend in here. The Army's doing $2 billion on average with 8A small businesses. Actually, if you back up a slide, I would say it's almost $3 billion, right? So it's more than $3 billion for 2023 for 8A small businesses, set aside and direct award. When you think about that kind of spend, it really helps you figure out the agencies you're going after. Part of this is helpful for figuring out which agencies to pursue. Like, if you come down on 2023, it's obviously DOD, Army, Navy, Air Force, and then Centers for Medicaid Services. And then next one is Defense Health Agency. So you're right back into DOD. Number 6 is DHS. This is the Customs Border Protection. So CBP at DHS. Number 7 is Department of State. They clearly look like they do some spending on the direct awards, but they weren't on the top 10 for set-asides. And then IRS at Treasury and HHS again with NIH in here. And so you're looking at these folks, and as you start figuring out what's my target agency in 2024, 2025, if you're an 8A small business, these numbers should be giving you pause to go, what's our strategy to go in there and get the dollars from in here? Also, consider looking at the agency you're targeting and go, well, what number does it come up on the search results kind of thing, right? If I look at that and there's not a lot of spend, what's the point of me having my 8A, being part of the 8A program if I'm not going to try to maximize the 8A dollars? And the only way to maximize the 8A dollars is to go to the agencies that spend the most with 8A small businesses. So this last slide, I just wanted to walk through really quick. As you think about where you're spending money, et cetera, in here, I'm just showing you the top NAICS codes for the 8A direct awards, right? I didn't do the set-asides, but just in 2023, all that money that went to 8A, I think it was $10 billion that was direct awarded to 8A small businesses. How did it get spent? And so here you can see right out of the gate, 1.6 billion went to this first NAICS code, 236220, which is some version of construction, right? And then after you go down after that, it's all professional service IT related type one. So 541611 is like administrative support type things, covers down on a lot of different services. 541, 512, 519, 511, 530, these 990, these could almost all be considered IT related one way or another. One of these is like a data center type operations. And then down at the bottom, one of the last ones in there, I think it's like facility support, or somebody else can help me with that. But when you look into how the spending is happening, you're searching also on your primary NAICS code, right? You should have a general idea of this NAICS code is how the government buys what I sell the most. And so part of it is aligning, the titles of what you sell to the titles of the NAICS code, but really part of it is figuring out what you sell, go see how the government is buying it, and look at the NAICS code they use. So the Navy, as an example, right here, 541330, they use that thing for a lot of stuff because in Seaport Next Gen, that's like a catch-all NAICS code, but it's engineering. And so it's not quite as specific as you might want in certain areas. But it's really important as you move forward to think about looking at an agency and saying which agencies are spending the most, and then aligning it to what you sell. So in this case, I'm using NAICS code. You can use the PCS code, get that same kind of data out of USA spending, et cetera. But when you find that data, then you're able to make sure my strategy is aligning to the agencies that are actually doing that spend. So it's a really fast dump on just trying to introduce you to the numbers and which agencies love 8A small businesses the most. Here's what I want you to remember as you walk away from this training. The first thing is go where you're not needed. Go to the agencies that are exceeding their 8A small business spend, right? Exceeding their goals. If you go in there, there's a really good chance you'll get traction. But if you try to go where you're needed, the people who aren't hitting their goals, there's a really good chance that they're just not going to do any more set-asides. They're not going to do direct awards, and you're just going to be wasting your time hoping to change their mind. Go where you're not needed. Number two is do what I was just saying. Match up your ideal agency to what you sell, to your NAICS code. You can find those. It really is literally like, let's say an hour to be generous, an hour exercise inside of usaspending.gov. Go in there and just look at the filters that are right on that, right off the homepage. You hit start a search and you can look at this data. You can gather this data yourself and you can validate what I'm saying. And then you can also narrow it down to your company's specifics. And number three, what I'm suggesting is look at the agencies that are spending the most with 8A small businesses and the ones that are awarding in the NAICS that's your primary NAICS, and then go over to FPDS and find those contracts, and you can filter in fpds.gov as well. You can filter this down, filter the data down, and look at individual opportunities. You can find the contracting officer and the contracting office shop. You can find them so that you can reach out and at least start doing an introduction call and getting in and start talking to them. Let them know that you're out there. And to me, one of the best things you can do if you're an 8A small business is introduce yourself to contracting officers who already have demonstrated that they like awarding contracts to 8A small businesses. They trust that 8A small businesses can do the work, and so they award the contracts to 8A small businesses as direct award or competitive set aside, et cetera. So build that list of targeted contract officers that can help you. As you're growing, if you have any interest in getting our help, we'd love to help you. I teach everything I know for free. And so we have a workshop called the BD Accelerator Workshop where we just accelerate it. We accelerate this process. So go learn more about that on govconchamber.com/workshop. Also, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and go check out on my LinkedIn profile, right on the home page of my profile in the featured section, you'll see the center featured item is the long-range acquisition forecast. And I encourage you to look at that as you're building out your pipeline, because in there, you'll find a lot of 8A set-asides, even sometimes a lot of 8A direct award type activity. Those long-range acquisition forecasts have people's names right next to them. So that can help with that building of a target list for government contractors. Hey, for all of you, as you have a good weekend, remember government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.